Hey guys, Michael here from Fat to Fit. So today's video was inspired by something I was listening to on the radio this morning on the way into uni, and what they were talking about was, it was one of those talk shows on the radio, and they were talking about how nutritionists are recommending that low-fat diets are pointless and there's no longer any point of doing them, and that they shouldn't be done, and people should just go back onto a high-fat diet, eating bacon and eggs for breakfast, etc. And so I thought it would be something good to talk about. So the basis of their argument was that low-fat diets, people who are on low-fat diets are more likely to consume foods that are higher in sugar, so more processed foods like chocolate and stuff that's pretty much crap for you. And so as a result of that, people should be going back to a high-fat diet where that people were probably used to a couple of decades ago, where it's high in fat, put oil with everything, bacon, eggs, etc. They use bacon and eggs a lot, so that's why I'm saying it. And I suppose my issue is not so much with them saying low fat, not to do low fat diets, because I think that's more of a preference for the individual, whether you want to do low fat or low carb, and it kind of changes every few years for what people prefer, which one people prefer. And now I think it's kind of more in the low carb and the low fat. But my issue wasn't with that. My issue was with them recommending that people go and eat high fat foods. Now when the average person hears that on the radio, they're gonna think, oh, I should be eating bacon and eggs with every breakfast. I should be having high fat meals, high fat meats, deli meats, everything like that, everything high in fat with lunch and dinner. That's what the average person is gonna think, when probably they didn't really mean that. They probably meant increasing the amount of good fats you get into your diet, like stuff you get from fish and vegetable oils and stuff like that, rather than just going and eating bacon and eggs every day for breakfast, drowned in oil. That's probably not what they meant at all. But to the average person, they're gonna take it like that. To the people that don't understand much about health in terms of their nutrition, and they were putting a label on low fat diets like they were very bad for you. And they were completely taking it out of context. They were linking low-fat diets with high sugar intake, when that's not necessarily the case. Like, a lot of you guys out there have probably done low-fat diets before, while you were trying to lose some weight. And you know that low-fat diets don't necessarily mean you're going to increase your sugar intake. I've tried both low-fat and low-carb diets, and my sugar intake didn't increase that much, really. If anything, it dropped because of the foods I was cutting out. But I suppose where they're getting that association is that when you normally drop your fat, of course something else has to increase, and that's normally your carbs. Protein normally stays about the same or a bit higher. You don't really mess with your protein much. It's normally your fats and your carbs. And so what they're thinking is that when you low fat, that means you're probably high carb, and high carb they probably associate it with high sugar, and that's where that association is coming from. But they didn't have any scientific evidence or anything to back it up. It was just like one of those talk show things, so you really can't be recommending that to people, especially with something like this show, which plenty of people listen to in the morning. It's like plenty of people on the way to work or whatever would be listening to this popular show in the morning, and they were talking about this, saying it was recommended by nutritionists, not dietitians, nutritionists. So there's still no further evidence there, and it was just it was just something that really grinded my gears. And I suppose the whole point I wanted to get out of this is, when you hear things like that on the radio or TV or in magazines or on the internet, do not take things at face value. Do your own research into it. Find out for yourself, because not everything you hear is going to be the truth, which unfortunately some people like to take for face value. I know when I knew nothing about health and nutrition, I took everything for face value when it came to those kinds of things. So it's much better to find out for yourself and do your own research. Anyway, I've ranted enough in this video. Thank you for checking it out. If you made it to the end, please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Comment down below if you've had any experiences with this, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you later, guys.